being that shines through them, somehow bestowing to them their own nature, which occurs in the plays in surprising, wondrous, and revelatory ways. Indeed, if there is one thing to be learned from Shakespeare, is that the divine love that seeks presence and embodiment in our world can allow human language and human action everything in its cause, and lists everything in its name, every resource of speech from malapropism to poetry, every register of language from the lewd to the sublime, and every mode of action from the clownesque to the heroic. Any character, fool or king, peasant or noble, woman or man, can at any moment respond to such a call and become a bearer of its gift and a messenger of its wisdom. They are what one might call his Sophianic characters. But those who respond to the call of love are often called upon to exist in opposition to the accepted values of their world. Hence, they tend to take on the literary conventions of the wise fool. Now, the wise fool is obviously a ubiquitous presence in Shakespeare's work, and not every fool in Shakespeare brings about love and goodness, but most act as sometimes unwilling agents of resolution in the plot, bringing about a kind of grace-like resolution almost despite themselves. For example, it is the Constable Dogberry's genius with malapropism that brings about a completely surprising resolution in Much Ado About Nothing. He captures the villains who do conspire in the play, but with absolutely no understanding whatsoever of the crime they have committed. It's highly significant that he has one of the most eschatologically suggestive lines written by Shakespeare. "O villain," he bellows, "thou wilt be condemned into everlasting redemption for this." In Much Ado About Nothing, goodness is brought about by a complete confusion in words and by characters whose own confused jumble utters a kind of wisdom without their meaning to. In Shakespeare's comedies, fools like Feste or Touchstone tend to disrupt. In his tragedies, fools like Lear's fool tend to mirror. These qualities are attractive, and we tend to think the fool's wise. But Shakespeare knows that neither the disruption of the accepted social order nor the distorted mirror of self-knowledge are sufficient qualities to truly transform the soul. What transforms the soul in Shakespeare is, I want to say, not moral insight, but a generous receptivity of the soul to the promptings of wisdom. In the comedies, this occurs as a kind of wit married to a feeling for the gifts of time. "What else may hap," says Viola to a friend in Twelfth Night, as she finds herself scheming with him, "what else may hap, to time I will commit, only shape thou thy silence to my wit." Viola in the play operates through a curious feeling for the right time for things, which powers an adaptation of her character to the totally chaotic world of Illyria on which she lands, separated from her twin brother by a shipwreck. The situation that she helps bring about include, again, through a kind of complete chaos, a surprising return of harmony, the return and marriage of her lost twin brother, the consolation of the grieving Olivia and her own marriage to the Duke, and the healing of broken relationships in the community. It's interesting that Twelfth Night actual fool is called Feste, which suggests feast, and recalls a traditional feast of fools and the playfully disruptive breakdown of social order associated with that feast. "Words are very rascals since bonds disgraced them," Feste tells Viola. "I can yield you no reasons without word, and words are grown so false, I'm loath to prove reason with them." Here again, the fool-like short-circuiting of reason shows that the anarchic power of folly inhabits the order of words. Shakespeare is wise enough to see that words and reasoning come together, and that sophists can always make the weaker argument stronger. One only need to think of Iago's whispers to Othello, or Richard III's rise to power to recall the catastrophic result of well-timed sophistry. So the fool says words are false. Reason is limited. Shakespeare says, even so. In Twelfth Night, the forces of love come to animate in the inhabitants of a totally confused world, and seemingly makes no attempts at reforming them into good moral subjects. Instead, love takes the order of the world as it is and spins from it a kind of surprising gift-like order. The surprising resolution from chaos to order, with the collaboration of the love-devoted Viola, shows the amazing discontinuity and also the mysterious continuity between the two realms, chaos and order. Viola in Twelfth Night demonstrates a natural ability to resonate with this higher harmony, and as such we can say her soul and her actions are unknowingly oriented to the good. This paradoxically chaotic element of wisdom is also suggested in the structure of A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which a moonlit fairy world just outside of Athens provides a completely chaotic, playful dream world in which the energies of love are explored and reharmonized, something that the orderly, sunlit world of rational Athens had been totally unable to bring about. This results, in the play's later acts, in the triumph of love over the forces of rationality and law. But in the upside-down moonlit world, a wise fool named Bottom ends up at the top. Bottom's famous words when he awakes from what he thinks was a dream are also theologically suggestive. I have had a most rare vision, he exclaims. I have had a dream past the wit of man to say what dream it was. The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen, man's hand is not able to taste, his tongue to conceive, nor his heart to report what my dream was. I will get, his friend, Peter Quince to write a ballad of this dream, and it shall be called Bottom's Dream, because it hath no bottom. Of course, we may laugh, and some of us may notice the garbled references to Corinthians, but Bottom is unknowingly articulating that a translated mode of seeing reality coincides with a synesthetic mode of apprehension, a coming of the senses in which each sense coincides with the other, where the hand tastes and the tongue conceives and the ear sees. As Nicholas of Cusa says at the Wall of Paradise, I begin to see you, O Lord, for you are present where speaking, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, reasoning, knowing, and understanding are the same, and where seeing coincides with being seen, hearing with being heard, tasting with being tasted, touching with being touched, speaking with hearing, and creating with speaking. What happens in the fairy wood is a comedic description of how the forces of love translate our understanding and alter our vision, making us quite simply mad fools through the eyes of those not in love, but wise fool in the heart of those who are. This image is at least as old as Plato's Phaedrus, a dialogue that coincidentally also takes place in a wood outside Athens, and is picked up by Theseus, the Duke of Athens. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet, he says, are of imagination all compact. Lunatic lovers and poets share the same mode of ecstatic vision. And as Bottom wisely says, he will get Peter Quince to write a ballad of what he has seen, since he knows that only a kind of ecstatic, paradoxical speech, words and music harmonizing, can make sense of the paradoxical powers of love and fairy magic. The audience is made to laugh at the foolishness of Bottom and his friends and enjoy the play of fairies they think they know don't exist, until by the end of the plays, the fairies invade the world of rational Athens to bring their mysterious rites and blessings. And Shakespeare leaves us unclear as to what exactly has been the dream and what the reality, the rational world or its inverted spirit double. Thinking of chaos and of foolishness invokes the motif of disguise, very frequently adopted by Shakespeare and causing numerous farcical situations. As agent of love, Viola in Twelfth Night spends much of the play dressed as a boy, for example. But at a deeper level, The trope of disguise suggests that in the dangerously chaotic world of humans, love must go about undercover in the world to do its genuine. In a tragic key, love itself must come out of its ground and attempt to create in the world justice. Thus, in King Lear, for example, we have the completely surprising return of Cordelia as the leader of the armies of France, attempting to take Britain and return it to her father. Cordelia had embodied the principle of a love that, in a world where rhetorical manipulation was absolute, could only be made speechless. But she transforms from silent priestess of love into an active warrior on behalf of her father's justice. This too is a disguise and transformation. In fact, all the characters in King Lear that call on the gods for justice fail to see that somehow prayers have been answered, because the return of Cordelia stages a return of possibility of genuine love and forgiveness in their world. A king that once thought he was the cause of everything comes to see that he's not the cause of thunder, and that even when one anatomizes those who have done evil to us, one can find no natural cause for hard hearts. When he finally admits to Cordelia that she might have some cause not to love him after all he has done, she replies with what is perhaps Shakespeare's deepest poignant line: no cause, no cause. These words of revelation provide healing in the play, but also allude to the mysterious relationship between the caused word of nature and the causeless realm of divine love. It's no wonder that Lear dies, wanting Cordelia to speak again. The words of love she offered were perhaps the only authentic words he'd ever heard. A quick word about foolish wisdom, its opposite. On stage, philosophers are often figures of fun. They tend to be pedants, sophists. And Shakespeare has numerous pedantic fools who nonetheless also display a certain kind of wisdom. Holofernes, the schoolmaster in Love's Labour's Lost, comic key, or Polonius in Hamlet in a tragic. In comedies, pedantry is a figure of fun. In tragedies, foolish wisdom can have catastrophic consequences. Polonius uses his own daughter Ophelia to find out what Hamlet is up to. Your bait of falsehood, he tells her, takes this carp of truth. And thus do we of wisdom and of reach, with windlasses and with assays of bias, by indirections find directions out. As we all know, truth cannot, will not, bite at the bait of falsehood. Were we to try and catch it, where it would slip out of our grasp, like a fish longing for the freedom and mystery of submarine life. Here, Shakespeare is being paradoxical about paradoxes. He shows Polonius, a learned Renaissance counselor deeply used to the conventions of paradoxical rhetoric, to be blissfully unaware that such words are tying him in knots that reflect the deeply false situation of Denmark. Just like a comic wit like Viola displays a sense for the appropriate timeliness of things, a foolish wit in a tragic key mistimes their appearances, their actions, and their speeches. And Polonius's lack of feel for the appropriate time to speak and do things leads to his unjust end, dead for a ducat whilst spying on Hamlet and his mother, attempting, by indirections, to find directions. I realize I'm running out of time, aren't I, Dominic?
I'm afraid, but this is magnificent.
I'll go to the end. I'll read my last paragraph and then...
Read your last paragraph, then we've got a few moments of questions. Thank you, Valentin.
So, just to conclude, through his foolish yet wise characters, Shakespeare gives us a concept of human play that perhaps images that of divine play, a creativity that is at once self-giving and mysteriously ungivable, since it is the ground of all gifts. Shakespeare's wise fools play seriously on behalf of divine love. In his works, then, the paradoxical language of folly becomes pregnant with wisdom, glimmering with a luminosity that cannot be distilled into didactic content. The speech of wisdom, conversely, never has the last word. Those who speak sophistry and truisms turn out to be foolish. Yet even they are granted moments of grace, gifts of insights, which appear in Shakespeare, as in life, I hope, profoundly unpredictable and deeply surprising. A surprise and an unpredictability that also has the opposite quality, that of feeling completely natural and homely, and so brings us home to ourselves.
Gosh, thank you so much, Valentin. Magnificent. Peter, do you want to host questions, or shall
Well, I'd like to just thank Valentin for that magnificent talk. You used a phrase, an ecstatic mode of vision that offers the deepest nourishment to the soul. I think that's what you've just given us, really. And also, you mentioned about some amazing phrases. Can't wait, get the doctorate finished. You know, the world needs to read it. So, and you said also, paradox is the deep grammar of existence, which is exactly what I'm going to look at this afternoon. So you've done a nice lead warm up for this afternoon. Any questions for Valentin? I can't see any. I can't see everyone now.
No, it should come up on the participants. If you're trying to ask a question and you can't be seen, could you just send a message to Peter on the chat?
Or reveal yourself, unhide yourself.
What you can do, Dominic, is you could make Peter a co-host.
I'll do.
No, I don't want that.
Well, then you can see the hands.
No, I've got enough to do.
If there are no questions, I'll just say this quick bit, which is the only bit that I skipped really. That in the late plays, for example, in The Winter's Tale, Shakespeare uses the figure of the fool in a kind of transformative way. So you have Paulina begins in the play as a kind of comic midwife, and she transforms during the play into a kind of spiritual midwife. So there's a kind of Socratic idea of spiritual midwifery that enters in that play. So that the concept of fool kind of progresses in Shakespeare's career. That was the only bit really that I skipped.
And is this the theme of your doctorate? Is this what you have developed in your doctorate?
Well, I haven't focused on foolery specifically. I've sort of focused on the sort of revelatory aspects of language that the characters sort of somehow utter, oftentimes despite themselves, or in the course of trying to bring about love and recognition in the world. So that's kind of, and so I use Cusa's late meditations on these themes as a sort of large cultural background.
Mariana, have you got a question?
Yeah, I have a question. As a layman, so it might be quite silly. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant lecture. I cannot stress how inspiring this was.
Thank you.
I was wondering, in your opinion, when Shakespeare is writing these themes, how conscious is he that he's developing them? Or is it rather a sort of unconscious movement of divine wisdom that is working through a hugely talented and gifted individual?
I think that since many of us here seem to be musicians, I think that the idea of music is really helpful to think about this. I think as a musician, when I try to compose, I'm sort of led by a kind of half obscure, half clear inspiration. And I don't really know what I'm doing, but somehow I do. And I think that there's not really a sense of a strong authorial voice in Shakespeare. I think there's a kind of very generous polyphonic kind of quality with many voices that sort of interact with one another. And I think what Shakespeare is extremely good at, perhaps he resembles Dostoevsky a bit in that sense, is that he lets his characters speak their truth. And I think that through this letting the characters speak their truth, there's a kind of symphonic or harmonic image that gets developed. And my sense is that Shakespeare has a natural feel for that harmony rather than transmitting a spiritual message or controlling where the play is going. He does obviously operate with received plots and a strong and I think quite subtle awareness of genres, but within that he's very, very, very playful and attentive to what needs to be said rather than what he wants to say. That's my impression.
Wonderful, thank you, Valentin. And you've done the best thing, which is leave us wanting more, which is always a really good sign. And we all wish you all the very best for your Viva. Will it be a virtual Viva?
It might have to be, yes. Well, yeah. I'm not sure yet, but
I've already done 2 in the last couple of months. Yeah, so it's the brave new world we live in. Anyway, I'm going to give Dominic the final word, but let's just show our appreciation to Valentin, and I'll hand over to Dominic.